By the grace of gentle moonlight, Therin and the riders drew ever northward through a land barely recognizable. His horse's slow yet rhythmic stride proving the perfect conditions for his mind to wander, as he remembered the lands of his childhood now forever changed by a near-constant winter. Eyes darting back and forth as he traversed the land all but foreign to him. Therin knew he must go on, yet in doing so he was forced to adjust his mount's motion by instinct alone, driving it on a path he could only see in his mind. Fatigued, he frequently attempted to search across the expanse for the faintest of recollections, but with every attempt he would only find a wealth of painful memories, and yet he knew that he must endure. For with every stride taken, the snow would grow harder and more difficult to traverse. Winds freezing and progress near non-existent, Therin searched for any sign of human habitation, but to his surprise he instead caught an emerald glow of a Taldar, standing defiant in a field of ice, its emerald crown shining like a beacon from a backdrop of unblemished snow. Bewildered by the sight, Therin could only stare, as he continued wondering what it could possibly be. After a short time, memories began to flood back until one specific moment held dominance over his mind. Surprised by the echoing sound of his father's voice, Therin maintained his composure and listened.
Ne Clot, a rare yet sacred species of Taldar. Though once widespread, the species now only grows on the slopes of Mount Akros, though why, even I hazard to guess. Lad, what draws you so?
Balin remarked, breaking Therin's trance. Startled and nearly falling from his saddle, Therin turned to Balin. Just past this grove we should find a path to the farmstead.
That tree over there,
Balin asked, lifting his hand as he looked to the thicket with the Taldar at its heart.
It kind of looks like an alder.
Therin considered for a moment, wondering whether Balin had noticed he had been looking at the Taldar earlier, for he had never met anyone else who could see their subtle glow. Anyone besides his father, that was. My father once called them Taldars. Therin paused for a moment, studying the tree again. I thought it might have been the same tree my father planted when I was a child, but the winters have hardly let up for the past 9 years, so I'm not so sure I could tell either way.
Wait, are you saying that it has been snowing for 9 years?
Balin paused, realizing the ramifications.
I am no farmer, but I am sure most plants couldn't grow well in these conditions.
Therin looked back to Balin, recalling something. You're right. I can't imagine much could have grown in these conditions either. But we should still investigate. I just can't shake the feeling that it's the same tree.
Lad, the tree is nearly 20 meters tall. It must be 100 years old at least.
Seeing Balin's growing frustration, Therin hastened his voice. I understand, but please humor me. We are almost there. The group rode for a time, and just as Therin had said, they found a small disused path marked by an old broken gate. To one side, a beam hung, its inscription worn away by the passage of time. Yet 3 letters held shape. An A, an L, and a D. Therin stopped, a wave of emotion filling his mind. The house should be a couple 100 meters up the path.
Lad, will you be staying here as well, or do you plan to continue your journey alone?
Balin questioned, clearly seeing the emotion on his face. Therin moved his horse forward, treading carefully through the snow. I will camp for the night, but I must leave at first light. My destination is still quite far, and I must reach it before dark. What about you, Balin? Will you be camping here long?
No, like you, we can only stay the night.
Therin continued down the barely visible path until it opened, revealing a wooden house half buried beneath the snow. As the view of the front door came into sight, Therin felt helplessly sad as a sudden wave of emotion washed over him. Though faint at first, an apparition of his mother appeared before him not too far in the distance, her very form coalescing for the snow and winds of his old home. Suddenly he watched as his younger sister stepped out from some unknown place and took their mother's hand, and soon the remainder of his brothers and sisters appeared playing atop a wooden cart. Whispered away upon the winds, the ghostly figures fell from sight, leaving a lone reflection of his younger self staring at his present. Paler than a ghost, Therin heard a distant voice which brought him back to reality. Sorry, did you say something?
Are you all right, lad? You look as though you have seen a ghost.
Balin replied, hand holding tight to his sword. My apologies, something very unpleasant happened here. But fear not, it was a long time ago.
Well, as I was saying, I could use a lad like you. The Dragon Guard is always looking for new blood to join the ranks. You are smart, clear-spoken, and better yet, you appear to have an education far above your station.
Balin pondered his last words carefully.
I have been meaning to ask, how did you know the Ald'ruin family?
Stepping from his horse, Therin looked to Balin, a solemn expression resting on his face. Agenor was my father. As the words left his lips, a weight lifted from his shoulders. Please realize that I never intended to mislead you. Therin paused, leading his horse to a wooden structure to the side of the house. We should be able to leave the horses here. Handing over the borrowed reins, Therin pulled open the large barn doors, revealing an empty space easily large enough to hold twice their number.
I thought as much. You carry yourself much like him.
Balin placed his hand on Therin's shoulder.
Your father was a great man and mentor. I am saddened by his passing, and even more so that it happened without me knowing.
Therin looked to Balin. How did you know my father?
He was the marshal of the Dragon Guard when I joined, and for 20 years he led us into many impossible situations. Yet somehow he always seemed to be able to lead us back out of them. Even the king knew better than to question his wisdom.
Balin paused a moment, his words lingering.
Lad, I remember well the years that your father led the dragons against the many thousands of Valentian raiders terrorizing the lowlands of Estwald.
My father, Marshal of the Dragons. He never told us of any of this. Therin pondered, moving toward the farmstead, their paths hampered by snow. Requiring no instruction, Therin set about to clear the path with Balin, quickly moving to help. Making hard progress, Therin turned to Balin. I was just thinking, I thought only the nobility could lead men into war.
I'm afraid I don't really know the details. However, while this is true in your father's case, I've never seen a man so adept at commanding. He truly was a force to be reckoned with.
Hearing a ruckus brewing behind them, Balin's expression grimmed.
We will continue this later. It looks as though I have some slackabouts to discipline.
Therin smiled, scraping the last of the snow from the door, and with a well-placed palm he released the bolt from its restraint. Slowly and with a little more effort, the door swung open, releasing a wave of stale air. Fortifying himself, Therin entered, every moment bringing rise to new waves of emotions and memories thought long forgotten. Fueled on by emotion alone, Therin followed his feet to his parents' door. Summoning what courage he could muster, Therin pushed open the frail door that he once thought so mighty. Yet to his surprise, the room was not bathed in darkness, as he had expected, but rather he found it lit by the soft, yet subtle shades of exquisite moonlight. Stepping through the door, Therin studied the empty space where the ceiling used to be. Spotting a glint of metal on the far wall, Therin moved to investigate, each step taking great effort as the snow-covered floor gave way in unpredictable ways. Reaching the gleaming metal, Therin reached forward, wiping the snow from its surface, revealing a stave of a magnificently gilded heartwood. With a firm grip, Therin pulled it free from its prison of snow, revealing a bow so fine it would be fit for a king. Feeling a sting of shame, he found himself hoping the wood had not rotted from its time sitting unprotected from the elements of nature. Yet in the motions of inspecting the bow, a second item drew his attention. Therin's eyes bulged as he brushed away another layer of snow, revealing a pair of swords somehow even finer than the bow. With deft hands, he carefully placed it against the wall and pulled the first sword from its snowy prison, then reached for the second blade. Turning to catch the moonlight, Therin carefully inspected the fine detail etched into the hilt and followed it as it transitioned into the scabbard. Raising the second sword, he noticed this one appeared to be a foot longer than the first, along with a white gold chain and pendant wrapped from the hilt to the sheath. With a light force, Therin slowly drew the sword until the chain binding it stayed his hand. Freeing his grip, the sword softly slid back into its sheath, with an etheric chime sounding as the blade fell to rest. Yet to his surprise, the binding chain began to shift unnaturally across the hilt. Suddenly it shattered into a cloud of silver dust, leaving only the pendant falling to the ground. Taken aback, Therin turned away his fears and kneeled to investigate, but peculiarly the snow had retreated and begun to pool. Without thought he reached out and grasped the pendant, but instantly jerked back. Ow! A gasp, Therin rubbed his hand in shock as the pendant began to glow from the increasing heat. Swords in hand, Therin stepped back, feeling a strange force pushing at him. With the wind suddenly stirring, Therin tried to turn, but quickly realized his body had become trapped by an unknown force. Thinking only to free himself, Therin soon felt his hands being pulled forth in a most agonizing manner. Arms extended and his fingers stretched, the swords fell from his grip, yet they only dropped for a fleeting moment before freezing mid-air. Scabbards slipping away, the steel of the blades swayed unnaturally, as if the metal had come to life, shining a brilliant white in the moon's soft light. Feeling the full force of whatever magic was at work, Therin began to panic as an odd static feeling was permeating through his body. With a silent scream, the room grew bright before exploding into white flames, burning away all but the most stubborn of things. Pulling his aching muscles from the floor, Therin looked around at the desolate room, yet there was not a trace of snow to be seen. Mind racing for answers, the door behind him suddenly slammed open, its hinges shattering from the force. Mouths gaping, the three men could only look on in shock at first before stumbling in. The only one capable of making a voice, it seems, was Balin. By the Tal, what happened? Noticing Therin was barely able to stand, Balin moved in to help, but then hesitated as his eyes fell on his clothing, burning in odd patterns across his entire body, save for his face. Balin stepped forward again, but this time he pulled up Therin's sleeve. With a gasp and falling to caution, he stepped back, shocked and with sword now in hand. Balin eyed the pair of dragons, one white and another blue, wrapping themselves around Therin's arm, shimmering brilliantly with a light as intense as the dawning sun. Therin staggered a step before collapsing to the ground once again. But this time he now stared straight up into the sky. "I do not feel right," he said in a whisper. Balin moved towards him timidly.
"Nor do you look right, lad."
Balin waited a moment for a reply, but didn't get one, and so moved in to pick Therin up.
"Boy, how can this be? No one has been able to unsheathe the fangs."
Feeling for a pulse, Balin started dragging Therin through the door.
"It's supposed to be impossible, unless..."
Balin stopped his train of thought, fearing the answers he may find. Therin tried to straighten out his thoughts, but came to find no answers. What happened? I do not remember. Eyes ever drawn to the dragons moving across Therin's arms, Balin spoke gently.
"By the light, by the Tal, it cannot be."
Finding a small pile of leathers, Balin carefully lowered Therin to the floor.
"Be careful, lad. Don't try to get up. Tal enchantments are incredibly powerful, and as far as I'm aware, this particular one may be far older than most."
Therin spoke weakly. Tal? What do you mean by that?
"I speak of magic, lad, though His Majesty, the King, sometimes likens it to the blood of dragons. But everyone knows that he has always been too poetic for his own good. Others far more learned than I have described it more like a river, or maybe a well. I'm not too sure of the nomenclature, honestly."
Balin paused, seeing Therin's confusion.
"It's in the prophecies, lad. The Tal'Doran will return at the end of time to stand before the night, our last light as it were. There are other less hopeful versions of the prophecy as well, but I don't really care for those."
Instinctively, Therin reached out for the swords now laying on the floor beside him. An enchantment. Perhaps that is why I can hear them whispering.
"What do you mean they are whispering?"
Balin questioned, haunted by Therin's look. "Sorry, I must have misspoken. I guess it could just be noise, but it sounds like it should be words, but I fear I do not know them." Therin paused a moment, distracted. "I know this is going to sound absurd, but I think they might be angry, because they keep repeating the same pattern of words." Therin staggered a few times as he spoke, yet through the sheer exhaustion of the ordeal, sleep quickly took root, and he fell, slumped to one side.